Right. Well, good morning and good evening, depending on where you are. It's lovely to see uh, you're all around the world, which is just wonderful. It's a real pain in the bum though if you do this kind of stuff. I've already done the session earlier this morning. The time zones, if you live in New Zealand, they just totally conspire uh, to give you twice as much work if you have like an international audience kind of thing. So I hope it works for you, and thank you very much for coming along. I today am going to talk about how to outwit AI's cognitive crush, and I'm going to explain what that means. And just on the next slide, and then I'm going to take you through the thought processes. And I've just got to say, this is only the second time I've spoken this stuff out loud, so I might wander a little bit more than had I done, like some of the prepackaged uh, stuff that I like keynotes and stuff that I've done a dozen or 100 times before. So just thank you for your tolerance in advance. Right. So um, outwitting AI's cognitive crush, and this is also known as stop the slop at the top, because it's for leaders and thinkers. The people, when I think of leaders, I'm thinking of they figure out where to go, and then we follow them there. We are the followers, they are the leaders. And the way they figure out where to go is by doing hard thinking. And AI is really good at it, helps you do hard thinking, but there's something I think is almost inevitable, which I'm calling cognitive crush, which is actually going to, if we're not very careful, turn our cleverest leaders stupid, and they won't even know it. Um, uh, there we go. Yeah, and I'm just going to. There's a Tetris board there that's actually like an Microsoft Outlook kind of inbox thing. That will feature as well, because this also has a third name, just to complicate things, called Tetracide. And I may or may not turn this into a small book. I don't know. But I really like the title Tetracide, once you understand that it's about Tetris and it's about death by Tetris. But we'll see. Plenty of time to play with that and with things like that. Right. Now I go up there and I click that. Cognitive crush. Here's a definition. Try and read it, and I'll just read it out loud, and then I'll just try and read it in a way that kind of breaks it up into bits. So cognitive crush is the condition in which AI accelerates information, ideas, and decisions beyond a leader's capacity to absorb and act on them, first turning the leader's brain into the organization's bottleneck. Notice here that it's leaders with the apostrophe on the end, so it's leaders, multiple leaders, all of the leaders' brains into the organization's bottleneck. And then it does an extra sneaky bit. It turns their brains into mush. So it's like a little bonus bit on the end of it. They become bottlenecks, and then they turn to mush. Now, if I were to do like if I went off and did a retreat of solitude for 15 days, tried to figure out what I do, and then tried after the 15 days, I came back and tried to put it in a Venn diagram, it would probably look like that. They're bottlenecks, bosses and brains. I kind of like help clever, leadery people think and use their brains better. And I do that kind of like with the bottleneck lens. So this is we're right in the middle of it there. I'm just going to animate that. We got that little exploding head emoji to symbolize, I think, what's going to happen. Right. Now, I need to tell you about the guy that painted my house. It's relevant. His name was Brent. When he was here, Brent has been painting our family's houses for decades. He's a friend of the family. He's painted my parents, my brothers, all of our houses. And he's a repeat. He's a serial painter. He's a really lovely, lovely bloke. And the last time he was here, it turned out that we were his last day in the job. He was retiring. I think he might have been 67, 68, and he was retiring, and he was just he was just the loveliest bloke, and he was chatting away, and he said, when I started out, we only had paintbrushes, and then sometime, and I think it was in the 70s, someone invented rollers, and they were amazing. Because suddenly we were 5 times faster. I don't know if the maths was exactly correct, but they've got this new technology came out, and they were 5 times faster. So, was that a good thing or a bad thing? Did they make any more money? Did their productivity? The thing with paintbrushes and rollers is that all of their competitors just popped down to the hardware shop and bought themselves exactly the same things, and everyone got 5 times faster. So there was no advantage in having it, but there was a massive disadvantage if you didn't. So there weren't 5 times as many customers. So what it actually did is it put a lot of painters out of business. Except Brent had been around for a long time, and in fact, his son worked with him, and his son was into his 40s, and they did actually have this little thing that kept people coming back to them, this competitive advantage. And it wasn't some clever business model. It's just that they were really, really nice. And when they came into your house, you genuinely almost felt like you come into their house, and you were a guest of theirs. They were just so lovely. And they come in and everything was tidy. I don't think they did a better job than anyone else, but they did a good job. But there was no advantage in having these rollers, except for the fact that they came in, they smiled, they listened, they talked, they did a good job, and then they went off. And 10 years later, you phoned them up, or 5 years later, you recommended them to a friend. This is relevant. I'm going to move to the next slide, because AI is a technology that has exactly the same problem for all of us. And now I know this sounds like a bit of an MBA version of this talk, but I've lost my co-host. Oh no. Christine is just, I saw her screen freeze, so I think she'll be back in a moment. So just imagine that we're now talking, this diagram applies to, they upgraded their technology, and all they did is they stuck on that blue line in the middle. All they did was keep up with all of their competitors. There was no advantage. The only disadvantage is if they stayed on that red line, not adopted the new technology, and they just would have faded away. But now, that's true for all of us, all of the businesses we work with. And I think it's also probably true to a certain extent for us as individuals as well, that we kind of probably, unless we've got some secret source, some competitive advantage, we're probably just going to have to keep adopting AI, enjoying it, hopefully, making the most of it, and for the commercially sensible reason of surviving and just keeping up with everyone else. So there is another option, and I want to talk about this, and this will kind of make more sense at the end of it. But if you think of there's some stuff that your AI can help with, but it can't replace entirely. And over time, I think that will end up being mostly the really heavy lifting, the heavy mental lifting that our leaders have to do. And when I say leaders, just to clarify, I don't just mean managers. I mean thought leaders. I mean the people who lead with their brains. Okay, now let's move on from that boring stuff, except to say that I'm going to show you how to harness that competitive advantage. Hello, Christine. Right, now, I have to do this just for my own sanity. That's a bandwagon. That's a picture of a bandwagon. And now I am wired for some reason not to follow fashion. Or if I do, I follow it from a very, very long distance by accident. But I've actually just now found myself, that's me there, on the AI bandwagon. And I really didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be one of those people who became an expert in AI just because it was trendy. But I had an experience a while ago that I've written 3 books now using AI. I've run them through AI detectors, and the only bits that they think is written by AI is stuff that I've taken from old books and copied into reference. So I'm quite good at writing with AI, and it seems to work really well for me. But I don't think of myself as an AI expert by any means. And you are all going to be working with people who've got their own deep bits into AI. But I want to tell you that the bit where I focus on AI is bottlenecks. And the reason for that is that AI will make some stuff much, much faster. Okay, you're already seeing that. And when components in a system speed up, bottlenecks move around. And that's kind of like my first principles reason why I'm on the AI bandwagon. And you will see on LinkedIn, people will be talking and they will actually use these words. Oh, the bottlenecks moved. And I'm going to give you just 2 examples of it before I get to the most important example. You've already seen this one. If you adopt, or someone adopts AI coding tools, and they go 5 times faster. Yes, good old Goldratt strikes again. But yeah, you then go, oh, well, we've got to speed up our testers. So they start using tools to get better at testing and writing test cases. And so they go twice as fast, which is like a miracle under any other circumstances. But then you look at your product managers or your analysts, the people who are feeding the developers, we'll say stories or requirements. And you do the same thing. You give them AI and they start working with AI. And let's say they double. If you do all of this, you've just suddenly created a situation where you think you have 5 times as many developers, but you've only got the people around them are only going twice as fast. So you can't use that extra capacity. Or actually, more likely, you can use that extra capacity. And you have the developers working with their AI tools going much, much, much faster. And then you will actually create 2 bottlenecks, which is the product people and the testers. And they will start cutting corners, and you'll actually create this incredibly fast and efficient team. So if you've read my Shape for Speed book, that this is the U-shaped timer team. And what we're doing basically is flipping it upside down. But don't worry about all the intricate details. It's just that if you speed up one bit, you're just going to move the bottlenecks around. Another one that's easier for most people to get their head around is that if you suddenly give 1 million non-programmers vibe coding tools using Claude Code, and they start making iPhone apps, suddenly the Apple App Store review process will be a bottleneck because it'd just be overwhelmed with too much. And this has actually happened. And probably the most devastating bit is all of the established businesses who are stuck in that bottleneck while all these new vibe coders are coming in. So that was a headline a couple of days ago, and I think the Washington Post. The Apple app review process is now overwhelmed because one part of the system, the bigger system, has sped up and it's created a bottleneck where they don't want one. Right. Okay, so now I want to talk about Tetracide. So Tetracide is what happens when the board, the Tetris game that we're all playing at work, speeds up and takes away all the easy pieces. I feel very clever with this name, but who knows? So there's my Tetris board again. And if it's not, it's a really easy analogy that in work, we got stuff that drops down into our inbox or onto our to-do lists. And we work on it. But if we don't process them all, it just builds up and up and up. And if you're playing normal work stuff, it doesn't matter. You just have an index, an inbox with thousands of unread messages in it. But if you're a leader and your inbox keeps filling up, what that means is your entire organization has been slowed down because you're not getting through all of the the pieces fast enough. Okay, I don't want to belabor the thing, but just imagine we've got our board with all the work coming in, and then we get AI, and AI, of course, comes first for the easy pieces, which would be, they like the nice straight one or the square. So it comes in, and we get AI, we come do all this stuff. Brilliant. We automate some of it. Brilliant. And they disappear off the board. And then we look and go, oh, what's the easiest pieces now? Because there's new easiest pieces, and it's these L-shaped ones. So we get rid of them. And then we look at the, I don't know, what that kind of like, whatever shape that's called. And we get rid of that. And then eventually we're just left with these hard pieces there. Except it gets worse than that, because after a while of only having the hard pieces there, other much harder pieces emerge, the stuff that we could never see before, or the stuff that's actually causing a lot of the problems to drop down to in the first place, the root causes. So there's a whole lot of stuff here that's going to come out. Now, of course, I'm really simplifying this for the sake of just going, at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that your inbox, if you're a leader, is going to end up with really hard stuff, because so much of the easy stuff that used to take up your time has disappeared. I don't know the extreme of this, because one of my warnings I want to say at the front, I'm not a futurologist, but it's not hard to see that this is almost inevitable if AI keeps working as it does. And we're all going to end up, if we're clever thinking people, with too many difficult, with a board that's got too many pieces on it. So here's our little emoji again. How about just sum it up? The board is sped up, and it's now full of hard stuff. Okay, so that's Tetracide, and it gets worse. I'm going to go to that. So board doom scrolling in the boardroom. I like the title. If you're old, you may remember there was a thing called a book written by a woman called Faith Popcorn in the 1980s, I think it was, called Fad Surfing in the Boardroom. So this reminds me of that, and it won't remind anyone else, but it makes me happy. So let's meet our bottleneck. Hey, can I check? Have you guys seen the book Thinking Fast and Slow? The one on the screen there, Daniel Kahneman? No. It's actually quite a hard book to read. But it's really worth Googling it, because it just points out how the brain actually works. Daniel Kahneman, he won the Nobel Prize in economics, even though he was, I think, not a psychiatrist, psychologist. He was a psychologist, and he worked with another guy, and the two of them ran, and they did all these experiments, and they discovered how people worked, how they actually work. And one of the key things that they come up with is that there's two different ways of thinking, many, many different ways of thinking, but there's two that stand out, called the fast and slow way of thinking. So the fast way of thinking is, if I say, what's 5 + 2, you'll go 7, and you won't think about it. The number will just come out. That's fast thinking. And he referred to that as system 1. There's slow thinking, which is where you get, what's 562 divided by 17? And you go, nothing comes out. So, no. So you go away and either work it out by hand or grab your calculator and work it out. One's fast and intuitive and really, really quick. And the other one's slow. It's a really, really, it's like one of the most significant books that's come out in the last, probably this century. And it's kind of hard to read, but go read a summary of it. It's actually really worth getting your head around some of the ideas in it. It's full of surprises. So I'm going to steal one of the key ideas from that, but I'm going to skip over all the deep stuff. So just to simplify it, and this is not an accurate simplification. It's like the fast thinking is like, the hare and the tortoise running around, and the hare runs fast, runs out of energy, and the tortoise goes around slowly, gets there in the end. It's kind of a little bit like that. And it's really important that you don't use system 1 thinking, this fast thinking, to solve slow problems. And it's very, very, very inefficient if you use the slow thinking to answer the fast problems. The two modes, one's like a slow cooker, one's like a microwave. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you this page, but I deliberately blanked it out because it's entirely generated by Claude. And I wrote it out and I thought I'd teach you all about it. And then I realized I don't need to. And I'll do that with the page that follows. If you want to know more about this, just go and have a look at the important bits on the next slide. And this is what happens. And just remember, we're back in this world where everything's sped up. A lot of the easy stuff, or most of it's been done, and your inbox is now full of hard stuff. And you are using system 2 to do the hard stuff, because that's what you use system 2 for, right? Now, there's a little trick with system 2 that no one tells you, but as you get older, I think you start to realize it's kind of true, because you get old and tired and grumpy, is that we actually have a limited supply of system 2 thinking. Okay, there's only so much we can do. And I bet if you asked your average 21-year-old, how many hours of this could you do? They'd all go, oh, maybe 8 or 10. If you ask your average or even above average CEO or CFO or whatever, someone who's been around a while, they might go, maybe now 2 hours, perhaps 3, some people. And because it's really, really hard work, what happens is you've got a limited amount, you do the hard thinking, and then when you do your hard thinking, you've used all up that system 2 thinking, you just go, oh, I'm too tired to think. And system 2 just goes to sleep. But it doesn't mean that you stop working. I'm sure you've all had this where you've worked on something really hard and you make great pace, and then you look up and you go, well, half an hour's passed. And I don't know if I've done anything for the last half hour, but I've been working away. And that's just where it just switches off and you don't even notice. System 2 goes to sleep, but it's supposed to be doing all this hard work. And if you keep working on, what it actually does is, as a shortcut to explain it, you actually switch into this fast, intuitive system 1 thinking mode. Okay. And so I'm not making up any of these things here. They're all been developed and created and put together by Kahneman and his, won the Nobel Prize for this work. But this is one of the really important bits of it. If you do too much hard thinking, it switches into the fast, intuitive system 1 mode, and you don't even notice it. And that's probably the most important bit. You just switch into it, and system 2 is supposed to be sitting there noticing when this happens to say, oi, you're making stuff up. System 1, oh, slow down. You're just inventing stuff. If anyone's had a teenager or even been a teenager, teenagers spend a lot of time in system 1. They make stuff up. So they don't notice. Now notice that the emoji there. System 1 thinks it's pretty cool. It walks around with a swagger and it just makes stuff up all the time. And it's really good at catching tennis balls that get thrown at you without thinking. And it's good at doing maths and stuff, but it's not good at doing hard thinking, and it doesn't know that. So I just happily do it and keep doing it, and it'll just think it's brilliant. It's doing very confident, fast, but thoughtless thinking when it's doing the wrong type, when it's doing the hard stuff. When it's doing the other stuff, it's brilliant. But if you use it for the wrong thing, it's not. So I'm over talking it now. When you fall into the system 1 mode and you're trying to do too much hard stuff, you actually think you're a genius. And I don't know if you've seen this book. It's another classic. I bought it in Dublin 30 years ago, Flow, by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, and I don't know how to say his name. But he wrote this book, and it feels like you're in this mode. And the way he described it is you sit down and you've been busy working away on something, and it's often artistic, or you're reading something, or you're just absolutely loving it, and your brain is in this mode that he described as flow. Everything's just flowing. And you look up, and 2.5 hours have gone by, and you could have sworn it was 20 minutes. So you feel like that, you're in that. But now there's another book that describes something that's very similar. This is much more like what you're in. Scarcity brain is about how your brain works when under scarcity. And the first bit of it is it's just really, really well written. And it talks about how they turn the slot machines in Las Vegas into addictive machines that reward you for being there, but they reward you randomly so you don't want to leave. They always think you're always just get about to win. And then you do win a bit. And so you hang around and suddenly 3 hours go by and you look up and you've lost all your money, but you could have sworn you've only been there for half an hour. So it's very much like flow. But they're kind of like, one's like this lovely angelic version and the other one's this evil version. And that's what we go like when we're in system one and we're busy working away on all these things. We think we're really clever, but we're actually not. And this is the trouble. We don't know. And I don't know how much AI stuff you've done with your chat. I've gone into that scarcity brain mode where you start out with having these wonderful chats, and then you end up in all this stuff. And at the end of it, you go, that was just amazing. We're such a good team. Oh, we work so well together, me and Claude. And then you go, what did we conclude? And you go, I can't remember. What did we discuss? And you go back, and it's like this big, long, but it traps you with this, like being in Las Vegas in the underground bit where they trap you. They give you free drinks, free pretzels, I guess, in America, and you play the slot machines. So it's kind of like that. Or if you like a quicker version, it's like doom scrolling, but you're the boss of a big company. And while you're busy working away, you're not solving the hard problems. You're coming up with stupid solutions to them. And while you're doing it, just to reiterate it, your brain's here shouting at you saying you're a genius, but you're actually a busy fool. And this happens pre-AI. This happens to all of us, but I think it's going to happen much, 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 much more. And the trouble is that this is happening to all of your colleagues as well, because their inboxes are going to go through exactly the same thing. But the good news is that this is optional. This is just, so this is like a public service announcement where I'm telling you about the, like I'm telling you about this so you can kind of recognize it, and just coming up, I'm going to tell you what you can do about it. But the beautiful thing is that this is a bottleneck problem. Cool. I don't remember doing that. Do you remember earlier I said we all have a limited supply of system 2, but we've got too much hard work coming in, and so the demand for work to be done exceeds the supply of work. So it's a bottleneck problem. And if we approach this like a bottleneck problem, we're going, where's the bottleneck? And we go, oh, it's all our leaders' brains. Okay, what do we do to manage that? And the most obvious thing is you go, oh, we find a way to prevent them all from going into system 1 when they shouldn't. So that would be the first step. And there's some other really clever stuff that we do after that. And all of it's relatively straightforward and easy. Now we go to the next part, which is stop the slop at the top. Okay, so we've gone through. We go, AI takes away a lot of the easy stuff, leaves us with hard stuff. And then if we're not careful, while we're doing the hard stuff, we exhaust our supply in our big brains here of system 2, the hard, clever thinking stuff. And we switch into system 1, which makes us stupid, but we don't realize it. So the beautiful thing about this is that this applies most importantly to roughly, I'm going to say, no matter what size organization you work in, assuming you're a big one, it's going to be less than 20 kilograms worth of brains. If you could take your leaders, they could be thought leaders, they could be your CFO, your CEO, your head of the big brains that are in the building, they probably don't weigh that much. So we can actually go, we could in theory weigh the bottleneck, which would be an interesting scientific experiment, but it wouldn't be very useful. But it sets the stage for this pretty picture. Okay, so this is kind of like the solution, and then I'm going to just run through some bits for it. And I think this will surprise you. And then once we've done that, I think I've got a twist at the end, which makes it really quite interesting. It's the stuff that got the most discussion uh, uh, this morning. Right. So let's just say that this is just a way of framing up what we've got to do here. And I'm going to call it the thinker's advantage because I write books, it sounds like a book title. There's three things that we want out of this. And those three things in the middle. The first one is we want the maximum brain power, right? So we've got those 20 brains and we want to get the maximum amount of time we can. And we don't, so obviously we want to avoid them slipping into system one thinking, but we want to get them to work in a way that gets the most thinking time out of them as we can. Maximum brain power. And so there's two bits of that. When you think, the top one is like it's workflow. If you think of process improvements and stuff, so much of it is just about when you do stuff. So I'm going to come back and explain this one in particular in more detail, and who you think with as well. So if you just think when you think, you can run through and you can work in a way that actually makes sure you don't fall into system one, and you might pace yourself and do a few other things. You're going to maximize the amount of time you as the thinker can do. But if you add other people into the list, so it's who you think with, you add their brains into the mix as well. So you've actually got much, much, much more thinking time. Okay, so and I'll come back and explain this. Now, the second big thing is you want the best solutions. And there's two things you can do to get the best solutions. The first one is to make sure that you don't just sit there and do all your thinking by yourself. It's to get those other people in. So who you think with. So drag them in, use their brains. They've got totally different experiences, different opinions, preferences, different ways of working, thinking. And that, of course, is like when synergy happens. And they help you get the best solutions. And then the red one here, what you think with, is that you bring in various toolkits, ways of seeing the world. So like for me, I use analogy a lot. You've seen it a lot already here. Tetracide. I mean, that helped me untangle and get my head around this, and I can explain it to people kind of what's going on using that. I use the evaporating clouds, and I use bottleneck thinking. If I'm going to solve a problem, I'll use those, and sometimes I'll even use a theory constraints current reality tree. But I've got like bucket loads of tools that I've learned from over the years. And that's what I mean, what you think with, is what tools, what frameworks, what techniques do you use to help you solve problems? And if you want the best solutions, let's say you're working on a strategic plan. If you want the best strategic plan, it would be really helpful if you had someone who understood how to put together a strategic plan on the left-hand side, who you think with. And also, if you had some frameworks that help you put together a good strategic plan, a way to think about strategic planning. So those things all help you come up with the best solution. Right. And then just the last one, you actually get to solve hard problems. So now there's something I need to point out about the red one here, that red bit. What you think with, when you're working on easy stuff, you use a completely different toolkit to what you do when you're working on hard, messy, wicked problems. So that red circle there is a toolkit that lets you solve hard problems. And the funny thing is, a lot of senior managers or big thinkers, they actually have those, but they spend so much of their time working on the easy and the medium stuff that they've learned this stuff in an MBA 20 years ago, and they never use it. Over time, they're going to be working on harder problems, and they're going to need to freshen up their toolkits. Right, now, I'm just going to go really quickly through each of these here. I have already belabored this. So there's three things here that when you think, and I'm going to come back to these are actually the key bit that I want to get to. we're going to build a moat, we're going to pace the Pomodoro, and we're not going to build the ocean. Okay, I'll come back to these in a minute. Who you think with down here, obviously it's going to be human colleagues. It's also going to be artificial colleagues. And it's going to be people like me and probably people like you, depending on what your job is, where you're often facilitating and coaching and you're helping these other people work together to solve problems. And what you think with, I'm not happy with the three I've got here, but I've already mentioned a lot there. Okay, so that's a draft. I'm happy with the top bit and the left bit, not the right-hand bit. But let's drop down and look at the build and mode really quick. Okay, so now I'm going to get practical. This is when you go, I would be best to schedule in my hardest thinking time for 10 a.m. in the morning, because that's when my brain works best. And that might work for you, might work for other people. So what we're doing is actually we're building a moat around our brain to protect it. Fairly straightforward. If you don't, most people, they're so busy, the amount of hard thinking time is like minuscule. And so it means they end up often fixing the same problems over and over and over again. So you're going to protect it, you're going to schedule it in. It becomes job number one, not job number infinity that you'll get to eventually. If you're familiar with the important urgent matrix, Eisenhower matrix, the Stephen Covey one, this is the important stuff. You're scheduling time in to actually tackle it. And you're scheduling in those other people so that you can actually do that time. Okay. Now this one, I find this one interesting. You know how when you start looking at stuff, or you start, that thing about you buy a blue car, and suddenly you notice there's so many blue cars, and you'd never seen a blue car before. There's this idea of of creating luck by just thinking about what you want, and people call it manifesting. But it is just if you become aware of things. So the other day I was watching a video from a famous marketing advertising guy from the 60s and 70s called Eugene Schwartz. And everyone that writes advertising or marketing stuff or copy or anything like that, they've all read his book and they all love it. And so I just happened to get access to this recording of him talking about it. And he's sitting there and he says, I'm going to show you, can you imagine this is in black and white? And I actually had to take the video and run it through a sound improvement thing so I could actually kind of hear it properly. He says, just look at this thing here. And it obviously wasn't my AirPods. It was a little mechanical timer, kind of like the little timer there, but it was like an old 1970s one. And he says, and this guy is revered by hundreds of thousands of people around the world, though he's long passed away years ago. And he says, this thing here, my little timer, when I go to do thinking, I turn it on for 33 minutes. And he does this thing, and you can just imagine it go, yep. And then he says it, and it sits there and it ticks away, tick, tick, tick. And then it gets to the end of it, it goes, and makes this, and so it says, there's your 33 minutes up. And I'm thinking to myself, that's just like one of those Pomodoro timers. And he says, and then I stop. And then I stop and I go and I do something else. And I won't let myself do more than 33 minutes. This is one of the most creative thinkers in the world. And he's only letting himself think for 33 minutes. Now, whenever I think of the Pomodoro timer, which I think they say 25 minutes is sort of the number they use, I always thought of it as a way of getting yourself sat down for 25 minutes. It was a way of you getting you started working. But the way he described it, it was the way of getting himself to stop doing the heavy thinking. And in those 33 minutes, he would sit there and he would read and he would underline the stuff he's working on and he would take notes. And then the thing would go off and he'd put it down and he'd go away. And then he'd come back a wee while later and he'd pick up and he wouldn't start it again, but then he'd do creative stuff. Because what he had done is 33 minutes of loading all sorts of stuff in his head. And he went away and he let the back of his brain work on it. For me, my equivalent is go for a bike ride. And then he comes back and his brain has done all of this thinking while he was off, I don't know, washing the dishes, playing with the dog. And then he knows what to do next. Yeah. I had never seen this before. It was just pure luck that I was trying to find a way to describe this. But the Pomodoro technique, just having the timer, just think of it as partly it's to get you started, but it's actually to stop you from falling into system one. But as you'll see in a few minutes, it's actually what happens when he goes away and does nothing that's the most useful bit. I'm going to come back to that. I think it's quite incredible and amazing. It doesn't have a name as far as I can tell, but it should have one. So I'll come back to that. So just that you built a moat around your brain. You've protected it. Whatever it takes to do that, protect that thinking time. Doesn't matter about all the AI and cognitive crush. You need to do this anyway. And then maybe you set your life up so that you've got a way of not letting yourself fall into system one. I've found, I think for myself, because I write books and I come up with all this sort of stuff. I used to think I was just lazy, but I could almost feel my brain when it was saying, I'm almost got to this thing that I'm doing. I've been working hard on it. And I think I've trained myself somehow to notice it and then be lazy and move away from it and come back to it 10 minutes later. And I just thought I had a poor attention span, but I've now realized that I don't actually use a timer, but I've noticed when I'm thinking too hard and I'll just move away from it because that's just what I've figured out that works for me. Okay, now I'm just going to move on to the next one. But the timer is interesting, especially for the stuff that happens in the middle. And then the other bit, now you know the expression is don't boil the ocean. I hope you've heard that so many times when I'm working with people, and I do it myself. It's one of the reasons why I had to sort of reschedule this, is I try and solve everything, every edge case, every single scenario, everything. And I end up trying to boil the ocean, which is impossible. This morning when I was preparing the slides, I went into ChatGPT and I wrote boil the ocean, but I actually mistyped it. It auto-corrected it to build in the ocean, which is why you have this slide here, completely unexpected. And I just quite liked it. Target, infinity up there in the right-hand corner. The plan, add water, repeat forever. It's actually really, I feel quite pleased with that. So that was AI being creative on my behalf. But with boiling the ocean or building it, what we do, people kind of like give it different names like perfectionism and stuff like that. But so often when we're trying to do hard thinking, we try and think all of the solution. We try and think it all out before we do it. Now, I learned about Agile. I've written 2 or 3 books on Agile now. I don't consider myself as like part of the Agile team, the Agile community anymore. Not for bad reasons. I've just moved into the leadership stuff. But if you looked at Agile, it was like, just don't do too much all at once. It's like, just do one bit, get started, get that. And then once you've done that bit, you call it a sprint if you want to, call it being incremental, call it evolutionary. And then just have a look around and go, oh, what's the next bit I do? And you probably already thought of it. And then you do that. Whereas if you try and do the boil the ocean, you effectively get into this thing of trying to write a 300-page spec and getting it all right before you go ahead. Yeah, that is the worst way to solve hard problems. There's a little secret with a lot of hard problems is that you don't actually have to fix them. What you have to do is make them half as bad, and then they almost kind of like fade away and disappear. So don't build or boil the ocean. Right. Now, this is a bonus one coming. Oh, look at that. Actually, the real reason I had to cancel is because I was putting too many animations in my slide. Okay, now this one is actually really, really, really surprisingly useful. I'd throw it as a bonus. If you're familiar with the theory constraint stuff, one of the overarching things we say about projects and project management is do not multitask. In other words, don't do too many projects at once. They all just get diluted and they take forever. Chop it down, 1, 2, or 3 projects, focus on them. I call it like the motorcade method. where you basically, it's like getting the president from here to the airport. You just give this number one most important project, treat it like a presidential motorcade, and clear all the traffic and change all the traffic lights, and it'll be faster. When you're working in this mode, it's actually different. And surprisingly, Eugene Schwartz said the same thing in his talk as well. But I think of it as the dessert stomach, because my wife, she's in Ireland at the moment with her family. And her family have this belief, which I don't think is scientifically proven, but my wife's a doctor. She says it's true, which is that after you've had your big family lunch and you've eaten everything, you couldn't eat anything else. And you go, oh, I couldn't eat another thing. When someone says, would you like dessert? The dessert stomach pops up, says, I'm empty. I'll have some stuff. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. I think within our brains that we can work on one hard thing, but like the dessert stomach, but like the main stomach, we can work on this. And then when we get to that bit where I'm too tired to think, we can actually have a little break and we can switch to another topic that could also be hard work. And our brain starts almost fresh upon it. And I can't prove this is a thing. The theory of constraints for years, I've always said, don't multitask. But I reckon this dessert stomach, being able to swap from 1, 2, or 3 things, but probably just have one main one, is a way to actually give yourself more thinking time. Okay. Now, nearly there. Stop the slop at the top, part 3. This is, I think, where it gets really interesting. So just let's imagine that we have our brain there and we have spent decades filling it up with stuff. And our brain has done all this pattern recognition and learning. And it's got all these synapses and neurons and stuff, and they've all joined up. And it's a work of tangled up art. And then someone asks you a straightforward question. And let's just say it's like, what's 5 and 13? And I'm sure you just go to 18. You pass that to your brain. Your brain says 18, and that's system 1. And it took half a second, if that. Okay, that's easy. There's so many different things that, but by the way, system 1 isn't bad. System 1's freaking brilliant, but it's really, really bad when you use it to do the hard thinking stuff. So it's when you use it to do the wrong stuff that it becomes bad. So now let's look at a system 2, a harder question. I'm trying to, I'll make up an example. And you just think, oh, I need to fly from here. I need to fly over to Wellington to visit Holly. Hi, Holly. And I've got to check and see if she's available and and so you sit down and you work it through because there's no immediate answer. When do I book this thing and what flights can I get and all that kind of stuff. But let's say it takes you 20 minutes and you go, I'll figure this out. That's good. That's sort of like normal, everyday hard question. Not really, really hard, but it takes time. And you get an answer. Now, this is the bit that's interesting. These are messy questions. And let's say you're sitting there going, oh, right. Just think of the UK at the moment, just got a new prime minister. And he's come in and he's got to put his cabinet together. And no matter what he does, there are 100 or 1,000 different combinations or permutations of the cabinet, and every single one of them will offend a whole lot of people. Doesn't matter what he does. So it's a messy kind of question. How do I get this thing? Many different types of messy questions. These are the hard ones that I'm talking about that the Tetracide going to create. You're going to sit down and you're going to start thinking about that. And he might go through and he might just go, I have got to get the Chancellor, the Minister of Finance, depending on where you are. I've got to get that job sorted out. That's the first one. And then he's going to run through the 3 or 4 candidates and he's going, oh, and at the end of it, he's done some hard thinking and he goes, no, it's got to be this guy. And then he'll come up with the name and he goes, all right, if that's like the tent pole job, I can set the rest of the tent up around that center pole. But I've only got half an answer, or much less than half an answer. And then he says, oh, my brain is full. I can't do any more. I'm going to go for a bike ride. And then the next morning in the shower, he's standing there and he gets the other half of the answer, or the next bit. He said, oh, well, obviously, if I had that guy to have announced it to the colleagues that he's accepted, that says it's good, I'm going to get this other guy. And he was going to be the chancellor, but he can now be the Secretary of State, or whatever they call that role. Obviously, it's a forced and silly example, but this isn't an easy question. And he's doing it in stages. Just like with the Pomodoro timer, you do a bit of it, and then at the end of it, you take a break. What happens in between? And this is, I'll put it there, what I'm going to call system 3, because I can't find a name for it. This is where the actual magic happens. This is where you load your brain up with stuff, and then you go, oh, and maybe you don't solve it. And you walk away and you do something else, and your brain keeps ticking away in the background. Now, I know time-wise, I'm just about 5 minutes from finishing, that we'd have questions. But that doesn't really have a name, but everyone experiences that. And clever thinkers actually harness it. Now, in the 1970s, they did research where they put things on your brain, and then they, and like ECG kind of like things, or maybe they put probes and stuck them in, I don't know. And they got them there, and then they'd get people to do exercises and things, and they get them to do stuff, and they would measure the electricity usage of your brain. And if they gave you medium level stuff, you'd use this much. And if you gave you hard thinking, you'd use this much electricity. And so they'd do all of this stuff. And then one day, after they'd done the exercises and they were just trying to figure out what part of the brain does all this, they left the probes on the person's head. And then they had a cup of tea and a biscuit. And the weirdest thing in the world happened to them, is that the electricity use went up when they stopped thinking. So you would think the electricity use would be the highest when they're doing the heavy lifting, but when they stopped thinking, that actually the brain kept doing more work. And this is this mulling time. What I'm playfully calling system 3 here, is that when we think we're doing the heaviest lift, there's this other part of the brain, which they call the default network, which actually keeps on working after we stop deliberately thinking. And it works in the background, and it chugs away and it does stuff. And it's the stuff that chucks out these light bulbs the following morning or in the middle of the night. A few weeks ago, I was working with a company in Australia, and we were having a big session trying to figure out where the bottleneck was, and just working on Zoom, and we're just going through, and my head was full. And then I went away and I didn't do anything about it, because we were just going to come back. And then I went for a bike ride, and I suddenly stopped my bike and I got out my phone, and I wasn't thinking. And I just went into WhatsApp and sent a message to Sarah, who was the person I'm working with on the other side, who's facilitating it from the other side. I said, I reckon your bottleneck's this. And I didn't even know I was really going to type that out. It just came out. Hey, that's really cool. And as I typed it out, I thought, hey, that's probably correct, actually. And then a few minutes later, I just had that same thought pop into my mind. So this is the system 3 that actually does the heavy lifting. And we all grab hold of system 1 and system 2 and go, yeah, they make sense. System 3 is there, and I reckon it's doing the heaviest work. So when we talk about protecting the brain and doing the Pomodoro thing, the word I had around pace, it was pace the Pomodoro. So maybe get some timer system in so that you don't slip into system 1, but pace yourself. It's like going to the gym. You're doing heavy work, so make sure that you build in gaps in between to rest and recover. And if you go into the gym, your muscles need time to rest and recover. But with your brain, this wonderful thing happens, is that when you stop thinking, it rests and recovers, and it builds back system 2 capacity, so you can come back to the work later. But it also keeps on working because it pops into this really clever pattern recognition background processing that I'm calling system 3. And that's where I think genius actually happens. It's very rare. I found that I've come up with something really clever that's been just me sitting down working through clever stuff. It's always had these breaks, and then little light bulbs come on, and then over time they join together. Right. Now, I'm just going to come back really quickly to this. So we've got system 1 and system 2. Yay, both of them good if they're doing the right work. And then we've got system 3, which is the deep background work. It's like the slow cooker. It does the connecting, and it does the creating. This is the creative bit, and it makes light bulbs. And then I'm going to cancel that and come back, and thank you all for your tolerance. And I just would like to see what you think of that. I have done a massive brain dump on there. I have spent about 6 weeks trying to get it as simple and as coherent as I can, but I haven't practiced it a lot, so I hope it wasn't too hard to process. Any thoughts? Go for it.
I have a question and a comment. First a comment. So all what you've been saying reminds me also of physical work, dancing, because sometimes I do contemporary dance. So I've been
Right.
doing it for almost 10 years now.
Okay.
And I remember how frustrated I was if I, couldn't do a movement. And what I did was try harder, like work
Yeah.
out harder, build my core and try harder. And then I got, I would, it happened to me that I, broke down. I came home crying. And then my husband would tell me, but you go for dancing because you love it. You come back,
Yes.
crying in
Yeah.
frustration.
Oh,
And then
good man.
I took breaks. And my trainer wasn't happy. She said, don't take breaks, because of the muscles and strength and everything. I said, no,
Yeah.
this is the good thing to do. Leave me be. And when I came back after, let's say 5 days or something, I was able to do it. I was able to do the movement from the first start. And then I
Isn't
said,
that
like, I need this. Yeah,
that's
this is what I need.
your brain's busy working and wiring things up and cleaning things up
Yeah.
while it's in its downtime. You know Wordle. I quite sometimes I'll do Wordle and I'll go, I hate this thing, and then I'll put it away, and then I'll come back and it will still be there, and I go, oh, It's sometimes it's a bit different, but leaving that gap, somehow it just lets things work. I
Yeah,
love that example. I'd
exactly.
never thought of that, but I can think of it like when,
I could
yeah.
it came to my mind. It was coming to my mind while you were talking. I said, yeah, this is not only for brain work, it's also for, like
So
holistic body work. Yeah.
actually, that's
I made
really, sorry, that's brilliant.
yeah, yeah. It happened
Yes,
to me. And I also
yeah,
go for a dessert.
yeah. So the real
I'm a
dessert
bit,
stomach is really, really good because it also brings you joy. Um, Uh, but but it is that I don't know what it is. I don't know in reality. And I was joking that my wife is a doctor. She assures me jokingly that there is actually like a second stomach that copes specifically with dessert. But of course, there's not really. But when you're working on stuff, it switching from one thing where you've worn out your brain to another thing um, that somehow it's just fresh and it's joyful. Um, Sometimes you do need a little gap in between to sort of like digest what you've done. But if you go back to the hard thing, you couldn't, your brain just goes, no, I can't do any more of that. But then when you switch to something new, suddenly it's just like there's space to work on it. Yeah. So I hope that helps. It's a weird analogy. But actually, it's a similarly related thing. You all know the idea of man flu, how men get the flu, and apparently you're not really even properly sick. So I hope this translates. I'm not sure, but it's like, oh, he has man flu. It's like he doesn't really have anything wrong with him. He's just a big, yeah. My wife once diagnosed me as a doctor. with man flu. So I've taken that as actually proof that man flu exists, and is actually a real thing. So anyway, that doesn't matter. We'll move on there. Any other thoughts or questions? Joanna, sorry.
Yes, it was more a thought or a comment. I just wanted to say thank you for explaining the various system thinkings. It turns out I've been working like that for years,
Yes,
but because no one talked about it, I thought it was a deficiency on my side. It was only my brain that couldn't keep going.
same.
And
And
so yeah, so basically you've normalized it and told me it's
oh,
okay to take breaks from the too much of the hard stuff. And I
I'm
appreciate
so
that.
glad. This is actually, oh, that makes me really happy because I had exactly the same experiencing myself, and I keep thinking I was just lazy. But then,
Yes.
and I keep thinking, and I go, but I'm writing books and stuff,
Mhm.
and people are reading them, and I'm earning decent money, but I feel so lazy, and I just feel tired, and then I keep thinking maybe I'm just getting old and I'm lazy. But when I
Yes.
kind of stumbled on this, and it was actually only in the last 3 weeks where I've just real I named it for myself, System 3, that background processing that I just realized I do that all the time. It's actually an amazing superpower, but I've never, the moment I named it, I felt really, really good about it. In my book,
Yes.
Roll 11, 12 years since that came out, but in the story of it, I had this bit, because you're Scottish, aren't you, Joanna?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Where are you? You sound
I'm
in,
actually based. I'm based in Glasgow,
are
but
you?
I'm a colleague of Ian's, so we work for the same company.
Oh, okay, okay, cool. Oh, I've seen your name in my email when you come through. Excellent. Yeah, so I'm just returning. You know, I lived over there for 16 years. I was in Scotland. And I was just going to say something. Ah, I've lost the rhythm of thought. But this will be another example. We'll come back in just a moment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've always found that System 3 works best when I'm emptying the bins for some reason. It has to be something really mundane. And then all of a
yes.
sudden, that's when I get a genius idea or remember to do something that I'd forgotten earlier. But yeah, it has to be something exceptionally mundane and maybe a tad dirty. And then like the bins. And, and then, yes, that's when a wee good idea comes to mind.
Yeah, that's so good. I I think that I'm glad you had that reaction because I was saying sorry in Rolling Rocks Downhill, which was actually the city it was based on Edinburgh, and the novel. And I had this bit where the guru kind of character said to the hero, "Whatever you do, don't think about small batches." Um, and it's small batches being a lean thing. That it was really important for him to not think about it. Don't think about them. Uh, and so, of course, the hero goes away and he tries really hard to do as he's told. Don't think about them. He keeps thinking about them. And his brain keeps interrupting him and going, what's this thing about small batches? And he notices small batches. It's the same. That little trigger. If you think about how I worded it, I feel this is retrospectively me being a genius. It wasn't how I thought of it at the time. But don't think about is actually almost like saying don't deliberately do system two thinking concerning small batches. And what it does is it triggers the system three stuff to happen in the background. And that often will actually push you when that emerges and pokes its head up and says, hey, you'll start thinking about it more deliberately. So that was effectively a bit saying, hey, look, put it in the back of your head and work on it there. Um, and we quite often do. Have you all had that experience where you're going, oh, I can't remember. Who was that actor on the thing there? And you're busy and your partner's going, oh yeah, with the one with the and they win the what's it. And then one of you says, oh yeah, let's not think about it. It will come back in a few minutes. And then it does. And sometimes it's the next day and you have to send a text message and you just send the actor's name and your partner goes, yes, I know what that is. That's that same bit. It's just the back of the brain, that bit, the default network is actually doing really, really, really hard work, except because we don't see it and we've not named it, we don't realize how important it is, and we don't try and harness it. So it's almost like this is actually harnessing that system 3 is I think the bit that's the most important here. Now, I know there might be more questions to stuff, but I just wanted to say system 1 is good. Okay, it helps you catch balls when they throw you at you. It helps you drive. It helps you do all sorts of amazing things. System 2 is brilliant, but what we've got to guard against most is when we get too much stuff, is falling into system 1 and becoming confidently stupid. It's the worst kind of stupid, confidently stupid. And then in the background, so what we should be doing is trying to find a way of stopping when system 2 is getting challenged, like that timer. Doesn't have to be a timer, something to stop. And then we want to actually move away from it and go for a bike ride or put the bin out. Joanna, put the bin out. You had the tidiest house. Put the bin out and let system 3 do some work, and then come back and start again and revisit what you were working on. The most important bit of it, though, is to avoid falling into system 1 and becoming stupid. You want to be able to actually become brilliant by deliberately triggering off a background process where you're doing that system 3. And one other thing, I got to mention this, sorry. Some of you, I don't know what you do. I know some of you are programmers here. When I first started working, I worked on old COBOL in the Bank of New Zealand. And during the day, the systems would run and they'd collect all the stuff. This is in the 90s. They would collect all of the transactions, and then they would be sent into a central computer. And they'd be logged there. And then overnight, once the branches had closed and everything had been collected, they would run an overnight batch that could take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours to process all this stuff. It's a really good way of thinking about what system 2 and 3 are. System 2 is collecting all of this stuff, all of that hard work, processing it up and that. And then system 3 is just in the background, overnight, chug, 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 working it through, doing all its work. And at the end of it, you don't see all the work it's done. You just see the result, which is often for us a light bulb. In the banking case, it was like there'd be reports and the accounts would be up to date. So it's just like batch processing. Yeah. Any other questions? Any thoughts? No? Well, in that case, thank you very much for your company. Thank you very much for the feedback and the reaction. And I hope that's been really helpful to you. It's been very helpful for me to be able to talk it out twice in one day. So I hope it's helpful. If there's one other thing I want to tell you, I had it on the last slide, but I won't put the slide up. I've just read this I'm reading this really interesting book. It's called The Emergent Mind. It's just come out, and it's about how the brain actually works with neural networks and things like that. And it's quite a hard book to read in that it's all system 2 stuff. There's no James Bond or Jack Reacher stuff in this. This is all reading it through, but it's well told, and it actually shows you how the brain works as a neural network rather than like as a computer, and how AI works. And I haven't got to that stuff yet, but it's just been it's hard work, but it's been joyful to read it, and I felt like little light bulbs, moments of insight come up as I've read it. So it's The Emergent Mind, and it's by Suri and McGilland. So some of you have work to do. Thank you, Holly, just for that. I ignored the chat, and I find overnight conscious pondering in the background is where all the best solutions come from when you can't take a break from thinking during the day. Exactly. Holly, I'm right under Holly that you grew up in Nelson. I hope I'm remembering the right person.
Yes, I did.
Yes. Excellent. So we apart from the fact that Holly is still living in Wellington. Would have been neighbours if she'd never left. So there you go. Cool.
Yeah. So thank you.
Cheers. Thanks to that, Holly. That's really nice. Okay, right. All of you, go and do some work. And thank you so much for your time.
Bye.